the joys. So, okay, well, let's get started because I know we've got lots of people on the call. Thank you for being here and being with us today for our Prenatal 3 collaborative meeting. We haven't done one of these in a while, so it is good to be with all of you, and glad to share some space with you today. For those of you not familiar with PN3 or somewhat familiar or trying to remember, it is a collaborative between Texans Care for Children, Tex Protects, and Children at Risk. And we came together as a collective about 4 years ago now, which is hard to believe. It's been actually probably 5 years ago now when it really started, was back in 2019. And so we have really approached hoping to help focus all of our attentions on that, on those first 3 years, those 0 to 3 years that we all know are so vital to a child's development and to a family's life. So just some background information, our vision, we want to ensure all Texas children are able to begin life with a strong foundation, have equitable access to health and early learning supports in their homes and their communities, and an early childhood system. Our early childhood systems are aligned, coordinated, and well-funded to ensure all young children and their families are healthy and thriving. This is our mission statement. So we really try to our lofty goal of really focusing on those infants and toddlers, making sure we really focus in on all aspects of a child's life and the beginnings of their life. We are what we call ourselves the three-legged stool. We have broken up our partnerships between Healthy Beginnings, which our colleagues over at Texans Care support, early child education, which is the work that we at Children at Risk support, and supported families is our friends at Tex Protect and what they support. So, so we are thrilled to be here today in collaboration with you all. Our agenda for the day, we are going to hear from our great state partners on all the work that they are doing, and they've got lots of stuff in the balls in the air that they try to keep up. So we'll first hear from Megan Young at our early childhood intervention, then Sarah Abrahams at prevention and early intervention. They've got a lot going on there with a big move that they are in the process of doing, which she'll tell us about. And then we'll end that section with Allison Wilson from Texas Workforce Commission, the Child Care and Early Learning Division. So, so that will take the chunk of our time. And then we're going to break out into 3 breakout rooms, one for child and maternal health that Texans Care will lead, one for family support that Tex Protects will lead, and then one for early childhood education that we at Children at Risk will lead. And we'll spend about 20 minutes at the end to dive deep into what we just heard and reactions, and some of us will talk about our policy thinking and what we're thinking about for legislative session, et cetera. So, so we have a jam-packed hour and a half planned for you, and are thrilled that you are with us today. This is a typical Zoom room, so please make sure you're muted, so that way, because we are not in a webinar format, if you're not talking. Each of our state partners have a presentation planned for us, but also have built time in for questions. So feel free to use the chat, and then when it's time, we will be able to stop sharing for a moment and have questions as well, and have conversations that way as well. So, so with that, we'll get started. Becky, are you able to pinpoint, put Megan as a spotlight, so we can see her face as well as the presentation, or do I need to do that?
No, I can do it.
Perfect. Because first up, we'll have Megan Young with early childhood intervention.
Thank you so much. All right, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. I love the little intro with the photo. That's super cute. So here's my agency template introduction here. My name is Megan Young. I serve as the Director of Early Childhood Intervention Services here at HHSC. I know some of y'all from my role prior to that. I've been with ECI for about 2 years, but I've been with the agency for 10 years, and I spent a lot of time working on maternal and child health policy at our Medicaid and CHIP Services Department prior to ECI. On the next slide, I just wanted to give an overview. I'm going to do a very quick one slide. What is ECI? Just in case we've got some new folks joining us today. And then I want to talk about some of our historical challenges and how those have been addressed in recent years. And then we'll end with looking ahead over the next few years. So we could go to the next slide, please. So just general about ECI. ECI is a statewide program that provides supports to families with children under age 3 who have developmental delays and disabilities. Our goal is to give these families the resources and support they need to reach their goals and help their children grow and learn. We contract with 40 local agencies who we call subrecipients to deliver services across the state. And I'll be putting a couple links here in the chat throughout. If you aren't familiar with our ECI website, there's a lot of really great information there targeted at parents and families, as well as at physicians and other referral sources and other community partners. So that's a great page to bookmark there. And we have that short URL to hhs.texas.gov/ECI. Next slide. So looking at some of our historical challenges, when COVID hit in spring of 2020, ECI saw a reduction in our referrals and enrollment. This is really understandable since many families, of course, at that time were no longer accessing childcare and were delaying well-child visits. That was the clinical recommendation in the spring of 2020, was to delay those well-child visits. And those are two really key referral sources for ECI. So once those activities resumed in 21 and 22, we saw really steep increases in both referrals and enrollments. And in those years, our enrollment outpaced both our agency forecast and the legislative targets and the General Appropriations Act. And since federal regulations require ECI to serve all eligible children, we had to stretch our funding to meet the needs of these children and families. We got some grant funding as well as federal stimulus funding to help bridge that gap in those years. Another funding challenge that we had seen in the past has to do with our methods of finance. So if you look up ECI in the General Appropriations Act, you see one number for the year, but that's made up of a lot of other numbers that include our federal grant under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA Part C. It also includes state general revenue, Medicaid funding for ECI specific services like specialized skills training and ECI case management, as well as TANF and some other state and federal education funding. And there's been times over the years when ECI was not able to access that full appropriation or spend that total amount due to how the total was divvied up among those different methods of finance. Since there are certain restrictions on it, for example, what we can spend TANF dollars on and what we can spend Medicaid dollars on. Next slide. And then 2 years ago, going into the 88th legislature's regular session, HHSC's legislative appropriations request included an exceptional item to fund our caseload growth and adjust that method of finance. The legislature fully funded that exceptional item, and they increased our per child per month funding target to approximately $440. And then on the next slide, I have some numbers just to help illustrate the caseload piece. So here we have our total appropriation for fiscal years 22 through 25, along with the target in the General Appropriations Act for the number of children served per month on average in those years, and then our actual number of children served per month on the right. So you can see that in the last biennium in fiscal years 22 and 23, our actual caseload was really high above the target. And then in fiscal year 2023, our target amount of funds per child, due to us being so high above the number of children served, our amount of funding that was the target in the GAA that our funding level was based on was a goal of $433.61 per child per month. But our actual was closer to $404.47. And that's just based on taking that total appropriation divided by the children served per month. So moving ahead, after the legislature funded that exceptional item, in 2024, you can see that there was a huge investment. If you look at the difference between 23 and 24, an increase of more than $25 million in 2024. So while we do continue to see our caseload grow year over year, the rate of that growth has stabilized. And you can see on the slide that we're a bit below the target for the current fiscal year, which is largely just due to the unprecedented growth we saw in the preceding years, making it really difficult for us to pinpoint when and how that growth rate would stabilize. But still, we're projected to be at about 96% of the target. So basically what we're seeing here is that we're no longer in a situation where our caseload growth is outpacing our legislative targets and available funding. Next slide, please. So looking ahead, while we're no longer in that kind of situation where the caseload is outpacing, we're still keeping a close eye on method of finance, but we feel we're in a much more achievable place right now than we were going into last session. And then the other big thing that we have on the horizon is a contract change. So we are preparing for a request for applications. I mentioned earlier that ECI services are delivered by contracted subrecipients, and this is a 5-year contract that is entering its 5th year, starting in September when we start fiscal year 2025. And to inform that request for applications, we issued a request for information earlier this year as a coordinated, transparent way of collecting feedback and data. Next slide. So in the request for information, or RFI, we covered topics including funding and performance metrics. We received 40 responses to the RFI, which is amazing and more than we had hoped for. I know that several of you on the call today helped to get the word out about the RFI, and I want to thank you again for your support in that effort. I had a few highlights here from the RFI responses. I'm not going to go into a lot of details here. If you want that detail, I would encourage you to go check out the recording and slides from last week's ECI Advisory Committee meeting, which I'll also paste here into the chat. So on the topic of funding and local program costs, while our respondents reported increased costs throughout the current contract term, when we asked for data to support this, only a handful of the subrecipients provided information, and those that did used a variety of different methodologies to determine and share their cost data, which made comparison and analysis pretty much impossible on our end of the state. RFI respondents did, however, universally recommend that HHSC continue to award all available funding at the beginning of the fiscal year, rather than to hold back funding for potential amendments to support local caseload growth. Next slide. RFI respondents also recommended against a potential cap on the amount of administrative, non-direct and indirect costs allowed within the program. And then when we asked about local funding contributions, specifically related to philanthropic contributions, which have been a component of ECI local funding for many, many years, we asked a question aimed at determining whether local funds contribution or a match requirement should be part of the ECI program, or should be a required element of ECI local funding. And respondents overwhelmingly indicated that they did not support requiring a set amount of local funding or philanthropic contributions. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight is looking at performance metrics. RFI respondents recommended that we shift from our current contract metric that looks at the number of children enrolled at a point in time during the month to the number of children served throughout the month. And that recommendation would also align the contract metric with the legislative metrics and the kind of the data that we just went over earlier, looking at the number of children served per month, which is how we report to the legislature and a lot of our public stakeholders. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, the intent of the RFI was to inform the request for applications, or RFA, through which we'll invite new applications to become ECI subrecipients. The RFA is currently part of the agency's procurement forecast and scheduled for publication in October. There's a link I'll also share where you can keep track of that procurement forecast just in case anything changes. We will host an applicant conference and answer questions after the RFA is posted, but I'm not able to answer any questions to the RFA outside of that formal process. I also have a link here and in the chat where people can sign up to get an email alert when the RFA is posted in October. And then next slide just has my contact information, and I am happy to answer any questions. That's the information that I had prepared to share today.
Megan? All right, any questions for Megan? Don't be shy. I'll ask one to get everyone time to think, because I know you all have questions. And feel free to put it in the chat as well if that's easier for y'all. Megan, you have 40 providers right now, and as you do the RFA, do you guys expect a big turnover in that group, or like as far as numbers, or it's done every 5 years? So just curious what that process looks like.
I mean, I wouldn't know how to predict that. I I can say that in the last RFA, they didn't get any new people coming on, any new subrecipients coming on. I think it was pretty stable in that transition 5 years ago. But that was before I joined their program. We are trying to just get the information out there. This is, it's a once every 5 year opportunity if there's organizations that want to get into ECI and start providing services. This is the chance, or wait for another 5 years.
Very good.
Megan, thank you for talking with us today. It's such an important program for infants and toddlers, and I appreciate your leadership. I had kind of two questions. I'll start with the first. You mentioned that because of some limitations, all of the appropriation may not be spent. And I know some about that, and you mentioned the difference, but they're in different method of finance. Can you talk a little bit about, like, what do you think is the top limitation?
Yeah, so that answer, it has been different in different years. So I would say right now for the current biennium, the biggest limitation would be in how the IDEA Part C funds are part of our appropriation. And I can look up, we talked about this a lot with the ECI Advisory Committee last summer, shortly after the Appropriations Act was signed, to really get in with them on the methods of finance and how we were allocating that out. But basically, the legislature gives us the authority to spend more in that Part C grant award than we get each year. And we have this ability to kind of carry forward. So we have a little bit of cushion in our Part C funding year over year. But if I were to spend everything I had the authority to spend in fiscal year 24, I would be cutting funding in fiscal year 25 going into next year. So we made a decision to keep that Part C amount relatively level. So where you see that growth year to year from 24 to 25, it's driven by the general revenue investment from the legislature.
Okay, so it's another reason why there needs to be more general revenue.
I'll say that we spend for the GR that comes to ECI, we're able to spend every dollar of that. The IDEA Part C is a payer of last resort, and the GR goes directly into the contract fundings as well as IDEA Part C.
Okay, great. And the other thing that I'm interested in is I'm hearing different reports, but as you know, the Medicaid continuous coverage has ended after the COVID public health emergency, and different ECI provider, they're all serving the infants and toddlers that they need to serve, regardless of insurance. But many kids have lost their Medicaid insurance either because they're no longer eligible or for other reasons, procedural reasons, they got dropped. So what are you seeing, or what are you hearing from programs about the effect on them? They're serving those kiddos, but maybe have to use different funds to cover it.
So within ECI, we largely were able to stay ahead of that. So we knew going into this fiscal year that we were going to see a big reduction in the proportion of the ECI population that's enrolled in Medicaid. And we did see that. Where we are right now is a little higher than where we were in February of 2020 before the continuous coverage policy went into effect, where about 63% of the ECI population is Medicaid enrolled. So that was built into how we funded, how our appropriations, what went into our Legislative Appropriations Act request, and then also how that method of finance within what we got this year. So we knew that going in, and so we were able to kind of address that. I think it was still really scary, and we heard a lot of concern from people because if you go look at those advisory committee slides, I have one where I track the Medicaid over time, and it basically looks like, okay, 2020, and then it kind of goes up very steadily over 3 years, and then all of a sudden it drops. And during that drop, it was really scary because, oh my gosh, what if it keeps dropping like that, right? But what we were seeing on our end within ECI was that we had 3 years of gradual increases, all, you know, unwinding in a 1-year period. And if you look at the most recent one, you see that drop, and then you see it start leveling off right now, where we're at the end of that unwinding. So we looked both at a statewide level and then at the individual program level. We looked at how we allocated that funding out, because the Medicaid is part of our appropriation, to make sure that those individual programs who saw steeper increases and the steeper declines weren't going to be negatively impacted in terms of not having enough contract funding when that Medicaid reimbursement shifted as they lost their Medicaid coverage. And we were really, really close. There were 2 programs that got a little adjustment midway through the year because their contract was a little off from what it should have been, you know, based on the reality of what we saw with their Medicaid. But last time I've talked to their programs, in the last advisory committee meeting we had last week, I didn't hear a lot of ongoing concerns from them about the ECI funding impacts.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Megan, a couple questions in the chat. Do the 40 subcontractors cover the entire state, or are there vacuums or holes of ECI services anywhere in Texas?
All 254 counties have a ECI sub recipient. There's some places like Dallas, Harris, Fair County, Travis County, where we have multiple. So it's going to be at the zip code level. And you can go onto our website and type in your zip code or look at your county and find the program that serves your area.
Fantastic, thank you. And then there's another one as asking if their organization would be interested in providing ECI services. Where would they find more information about the process?
Yeah, so the link I shared earlier to sign up to get information on the RFA, that if you put your email address in there, you will get an automated email when the RFA posts, and that is the vehicle to apply to become an ECI subrecipient.
Cool. And Stephanie, I think you've got a question, and you'll be our last one for this one before we move on to Sarah Abrams.
Yeah, hey Megan. You mentioned, thank you for presenting, first of all, and you mentioned a topic I know that comes up a lot, which is the availability of mid-year funding for you to be responsive to programs as enrollments go up or financial challenges increase or things like that. And I guess, is there, what's your sense about how much flexibility do you have to make that happen? I know there's the LBB, but is there something for all of us to think about to ensure that the programs can make it work with the access to mid-year funding? I know you think about it a lot, and I appreciate that.
So I mentioned it in the RFA, we asked this question of, you know, in prior years, we haven't done this very recently, but it is historically, the ECI program has said, okay, here's our set budget for this fiscal year. Let's award out all but a little portion of it at the beginning of the year. And then we'll see who's over their enrollment target and push out that additional funding to them partially through the year to carry them through the end, right? What we've done more recently, and what was overwhelmingly recommended that we continue doing in the RFI, was to award out all that funding at the beginning of the year. So then what mid-year adjustments look like is we say, okay, who's underserving? Who has gotten, you know, a lot more insurance reimbursement than they anticipated, and they may lapse some of their contract funding. We would work with those programs to amend their contract down and then reallocate that funding out to programs that are overserving, that are over their enrollment target.
Okay. Pros and cons to each approach for sure, but yeah, no, I know that's hard on you. It's really important for people to remember, right, that enrollment in ECI is as kids come in, right? It's not, the contract is kind of an estimate of what programs expect to serve, and if more kids come in, they have to figure out a way to do it. So, you know, you're being creative with that is really appreciated. Thank you,
Stephanie.
Great. Well, Megan, thank you on behalf of all of us and the PN3 Collaborative. Thanks for being here today and your continued leadership and work and all that you do. And with that, we'll turn it over to Sarah Abrams and give us an update there. And Sarah, you don't have a PowerPoint. You're just going to talk and tell me when
I don't have a PowerPoint. I'm just going to talk. And so maybe like, you're welcome to pin my giant face on, don't have slides. Maybe we can like chat like this. I'll leave it up to y'all as the host.
And
to
Sarah, let me know when you want the video. I will show that when you're ready.
I'm gonna
So,
do it at the end. Thank you,
okay,
Tim.
perfect.
So I'm gonna apologize right up front because I don't have slides and I know that it can be hard to listen to someone talk without slides, but I will own all of that because we are 7 days from our transition from DFPS to HHSC, and it's a little bit of a whirlwind over here. So I'm gonna ask for your patience while I provide a couple of updates. And I do just want to share a little bit of information about where we are with two of our big intensive projects this past year. One is obviously this transition of prevention and early intervention from DFPS to become family support services at HHSC. And we are very, very close to that September 1st official transition date. I also want to share a few updates around some of our expansion efforts. We were awarded some additional appropriations in the last legislative session for 5 of our specific programs within PEI or FSS. And I can share an update about where we are with that and how that money has been distributed. And then I just want to share a few more updates and share a video at the end highlighting one of our programs that is up for reprocurement this year. So I'll start with expansion. So in this past legislative session, we received about $65 million of general revenue appropriation to support 5 of our programs. Our PHASE program, so Family and Youth Success, our Community Youth Development Program, our HOPES program, which is focused specifically on serving families with kiddos 0 to 5. Our Texas Home Visiting Program, which is a combination of federal and state funded evidence-based home visiting programs, and then our Texas Nurse Family Partnership program. So in our PHASE program, which is a family-based support program with a lot of flexibility to serve families, but really with a priority of serving school-aged families rather than early childhood-focused families. We received about $7 million each year of this biennium. Because PHASE is our only program that currently has statewide coverage, which means that we have PHASE providers covering all 254 counties and offering services in all those counties. We chose not to release a new RFA, but instead to distribute those funds through existing grantees to expand and support work that they were already doing. In many cases, they were able to set up satellite offices or more formal staffing in some of our more rural communities. We also saw many of our providers, our PHASE providers, expanding basic needs support, implementing financial literacy and other kinds of sort of self-sufficiency efforts at the local level. And we also saw many folks adding Spanish-speaking counselors and other kinds of dual language approaches for families as a part of this expansion project. For our Community Youth Development Program, we received $2 million for each year of the biennium. And that allowed us to expand into 2 new communities with 2 new providers. Our CYD program, rather than being a county level intervention, is a zip code level intervention. So it's a very localized neighborhood and school driven support work for youth and their families, and includes a lot of sort of youth resiliency, youth leadership, sort of positive youth development work. And some of the work that we saw as a part of that expansion included implementing mentoring programs at the local level, creating and supporting youth advisory councils, specific youth development and youth leadership support, and some additional added programs in these new areas around wellness, physical movement, and sports and recreation. In our HOPES program, we received a little under $9 million a year for each of the years of the biennium. We took a dual approach to the distribution and the granting out of the HOPES expansion funds. Some of those funds we distributed through existing grantees to help expand work in some of the counties already being served. And then we also, excuse me, issued a request for application in order to expand the geographic reach of HOPES and serve more families in that way. We are serving almost 24 new counties through that both expansion and RFA development. Many of those awards are in the final stages of signature and amendment process, but we anticipate being able to add about 3,000 families across the state to HOPES programming through that expansion effort. And I'll say that some of the activities that we're seeing, both in the new communities and in some of our expansion within existing communities, include expanding the use and implementation of family resource centers, expanding parenting education with new curricula or evidence-based programs, including family economic stability initiatives, including career workshops and other kinds of financial literacy support, and building on long-standing partnerships with school districts and workforce development boards, specifically to conduct outreach to families through those entities. Our Texas Home Visiting Program received a little over $10 million in general revenue, but we also received some additional funds through our MCV, our federally funded maternal infant childhood home visiting program. That is in part because they adjusted some of the methodology for their formula of financial distribution at the federal level, and state population played a heavier role than it had in past years. And so we've, as a large state, received a bit more money, almost $8 million per year. We also distributed some of those funds through existing grants to help expand and support that work that was happening already, and also released a request for application this year and were able to fund 18 new counties through that expansion effort. In addition to providing in addition to expanding the reach of some of our existing evidence-based home visiting, like Parents as Teachers or HIPPY, we also were able to add some new home visiting models for Texas, including play and learning strategies, promoting first relationships, and family checkup for children. All three of which are models approved by MCV and on the Home Visiting Clearinghouse, but had not yet been implemented in Texas. We also saw many of our home visiting programs add local fatherhood programming to their home visiting to complement their home visiting work, to formalize partnerships to serve specialized populations, specifically teen parents, and to add mothers and babies, which is a specific intervention for expecting and new parents to help manage stress and prevent postpartum depression. And then for our Texas Nurse Family Partnership Program, we tackled this in a fairly unique way. We received about $2 million additional dollars in appropriations for this specific program. But there were two limitations to expanding our geographic reach of Texas home visiting. One is that there were no additional home visiting programs that were certified under the Nurse Family Partnership model. We currently fund all of the Texas Nurse Family Partnership programs that are certified under NFP. And then the second was that we were really hearing from providers, especially post-pandemic, that the salaries connected and the costs connected to providing a nurse home visiting program had increased so dramatically and so drastically in that post-COVID period that they were struggling to maintain staffing without some additional support around salaries and staff incentives. So we did see that those dollars primarily distributed to existing grantees. Some of that was to address cost and salary issues, but we also saw our Nurse Family Partnership programs undertake some specialized initiatives. Many of them worked to have their nurse home visitors become certified lactation counselors. Many of them increased specific formal partnerships with WIC and other pregnancy testing centers in their local areas. And we saw several develop local parent advisory committees and new partnerships with schools to focus on teen parents and with clinics and local clinics to help new moms access a primary care home where they may have not had one before. So those were some of the specialized initiatives that we saw as a part of that expansion as well. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about transition. I'm trying to make sure that I stay on time and that we have a chance to see this video. There has been a lot of work that has gone into transitioning this set of programs from one agency to another. And I am excited to report that as of right now, that everything is really on track for a fairly smooth transition. We have been working in partnership between DFPS and HHSC, all staff, all of our reporting and data systems, our financial systems, all of the resources and budget management systems are on track to move on September 1st. We have been working through this past year very closely with Family Health Services and HHSC to partner on the expansion work that I just shared. That was all done as a collaborative effort, and that work was approved by both agencies moving forward. So we have really been reporting to two bosses in many ways for the past year. And HHSC and PEI, I think together have really worked to assist our grantees with this transition. Our HHSC leadership and staff participated in the RFA evaluations connected to the expansion work. So that was very much a dual approach. HHSC leadership and DFPS leadership both participated on a panel at our previous Partners in Prevention conference and have met several times with staff and grantees. HHSC and PEI staff conducted joint local site visits to really ensure that HHSC leadership could learn and understand what PEI and Family Support Services were all about and hear directly from local grantees and even from families about the impact that this work has had in their local communities. And HHSC has been connected to all of the hiring and other kinds of budget and forecasting work we have been doing leading into FY25. We are all currently in the process of having all of our all the logistics part of having this transition happen. So all of our equipment and phones and computers and email addresses are all in the process of changing over this past couple of weeks. That's part of the reason why there is no PowerPoint today. And so I think collectively we'll just ask for your patience and grace as we make that transition. But just to know that all of our emails are changing. So if you had an email, if you were regularly emailing or inviting one of us among our PEI and FSS staff to meetings or sharing materials, or that we were on mailing lists and you have not already heard from us, to make that official change, just to know that our emails will only forward for 30 days, I think. And then after that, you'll start getting bounce back emails to say that we are no longer at DFPS. Just two things I want to raise. I think for our grantees, the changes should feel minimal. Like 9.3 is not going to be a big explosion of change for our grantees. We imagine that invoicing will continue to happen. PEERS, which is our system of record, is being maintained. There should be and feel no major changes for grantees around those like big issues, data and money. I know we did have a couple of changes that I think are impacting grantees pretty directly. One is a change to our background check processes and policies. And part of that is just is related to this change of agency and the level of authority that DFPS had and HHSC does not have around conducting and processing background checks. So effective September 1 of this year, grantees are responsible for independently managing the background check requirements, whereas before DFPS was doing that work on their behalf. And that is a change for grantees, and we have been communicating actively with grantees about what that means and what the processes will look like. There are also other forms and processes that are changing, so it's not that nothing is changing. And so, there's different indirect cost rate documentation. Grantees will likely see some modifications to our monitoring forms in FY25, but overall, the processes themselves are not changing immediately. We do anticipate that once we move to HHSC and sort of settle in our new home, that there will be additional efforts to streamline reports across the Family Health Services Division. And so for programs that are alike or connected or providing the same kind of support or training or budget adjustment work as we are to our grantees, that we'll want to align our forms and make sure that they're consistent across the board. None of that stuff has changed already, and we expect that there will be time for that once we are at HHSC. Okay, and then I think I want to give a shout out to our Partners in Prevention Conference. I think many of you have attended in the past. I see lots of familiar names on the screen, but if you haven't, Partners in Prevention is one of the largest conferences in the state. It is a true partnership work. There are a number of sort of grantee business meetings that we host as a part of the Partners in Prevention Conference, but it is also a chance for folks working in this family support space to collaborate with each other, to learn from each other. There are some amazing breakout sessions. I'm going to drop the link in the chat. The registration is open now. It is being held in Denton, Texas this year, the week before Thanksgiving, which some folks love and think is amazing, and some folks feel like is maybe not the best timing. I'm on the love side. I think it's a great way to kick off a couple of days break. And I feel super energized by it. So I hope to see many of you there. And then the last thing I wanted to share, and I'm going to turn it over to Kim and Lynn to help me organize this. We have been working over the past year to develop sort of videos of families explaining and telling the story of what PEI or family support programs have done for them and their families. It's so impactful to hear directly from families. And sometimes when we say family support services or even prevention work, it's not always clear what that means to folks that aren't swimming in this every day. So I wanted to share one of our newer videos. All of these videos are now on our Get Parenting Tips website, but this is one of our newest ones, and it's highlighting our service members' veterans family program. This is one of two programs that will where we will be releasing a new request for application this coming fall with a 5-year cycle start date of September 1, 2025. So the Military and Veterans Families program is one, and our HOPES program is the second program that will have an RFA released this fall. So with that, I'm going to turn it over and let you run the show.
Okay, I'm going to press play. Holler if it doesn't, you can't hear it, but it should work.
When we first married, I was in the military. Right after we had our oldest is when I got out. We were having a lot of difficulty with Geraldo and his transition. I was getting like multiple messages and calls from the school a day about his behavior, and I was like, I need some outside input and help.
My husband was deployed when I met them. I think that gave me a greater insight of knowing what they go through. So we connected and bonded really fast with each other. Triple P stands for Positive Parenting Program. In our curriculum, it's more of digging deeper into self and then looking to see if maybe some of these things I do is why my child does it, and changing those routines.
Definitely different parenting styles. He's kind of more of the like, okay, suck it up type. And I'm more of the like, oh, it's okay, everything will be all right, you know.
Coming from a background that I did, I was just kind of like, he did something bad, he got punished for it. I said, you know, as I was growing up, if I'm gonna have a family, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna try to change it a little bit.
There were certain things that I could see myself doing that I didn't like. And so going through the Triple P program kind of put us on the same page, because it was kind of like, well, this is what's going to work. So this is what we have to do.
Mr. Rivera is the first sergeant in the Army, so he had a lot of responsibilities. With this program, that was the great part about it, was having Mr. Rivera getting out of his uniform and just connecting with his children instead of with his soldiers.
One thing that really helped with Geraldo that Ms. Jackson taught us was like to be proactive about things, to prepare him and to allow him to know, okay, like if this happens, this is what I'm gonna do.
As we started to see mom and dad's routines change, then we started to see Geraldo's routines change.
Working with Denise has worked a lot. The behaviors have changed completely for Geraldo.
With the behaviors that we were seeing prior, it was very stressful in the marriage. So when all of that settled down, it was, I think, a very big help to our marriage.
I want to keep that going. You know, I don't want them to think that they're only in session with me for 10 sessions and goodbye. I'm in this with them, no matter where I'm at.
She kind of was our village. She didn't treat us like we were just another client. So I'm very attached to her, just like she is to our family. She knew what was good for us before we knew what was good for us.
Service members, veterans, and families, this will make a major impact in your life.
Ms. Jackson's amazing, and everyone should know that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for letting me share that. I think you can see why we're so excited about this series of videos. And we think it really helps illustrate what this work is. So that's it for me.
All right, Sarah. Well, we've got one question in the chat from Sarah Crockett. Will grantees get funded to help cover the cost of background checks, and how will background checks be monitored or verified under HHSC?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. We have done a lot of work with grantees to ensure, I mean, for sure, the background checks are an allowable cost under their grants. There's no additional money coming with that. But we have found that in every case, we've been able to manage those costs within their existing budget. Background checks will, we are working with each grantee to ensure that they have their own organizational and agency policies about how they're doing it. Each, depending on what kind of organization they are, they may be approaching this a little bit differently, and our monitoring process will adjust based on what their policies are. So that's a sort of broad answer, but some of that is it just depends.
Yep. Sounds
So-
good. Sarah, again, thank you for being here, and again, your leadership. Good luck with your 7 days till transition. We are all sending you good juju. I think there's one more question in the chat, but if you wanted to answer that one on your own, just in the sense of time, we will jump over to our colleagues over at Texas Workforce Commission. And Allison, you're already sharing screen. You're ready to go. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. All right, so I just have a few slides hitting some of the major updates because I know you guys always have a lot of questions for TWC, so I'm gonna try to leave plenty of time for that. Okay, so to start off, wanted to share just a few updates on legislation and implementation of that legislation. So as you know, we have the Workforce Strategic Plan. That's gonna be around before you know it, that we've got to do another one. So we are, we're in the process of procuring a vendor that's going to help us with that next one. But I wanted to give you some updates on that first plan and recommendations that for strategies and goals that we have already addressed. So a couple of those things are that we provided guidance on local childcare committees, and boards have formed those, and those have begun meeting. We also have a strategic planning guide that we developed for boards to use as they think about how to spend their quality set-aside funds. We're also hosting an annual event now to provide some training and share best practices and do some peer exchange around designing those quality initiatives, being responsive to the needs of their community, and with a focus on, data-driven decision-making and being able to really look at outcomes for the things that they fund. We also now publish those reports that we get quarterly from boards that detail their quality activities. And then the last thing I wanted to note that we've also made progress on is on improvements to TechPEDS, to the Workforce and Trainer Registry. We did earlier this year contract with an outside entity that conducted a robust usability study of the website, because we've heard so much feedback that it could use some improvements. So they conducted a study and came out with a set of recommendations for improvements. And we're right now in the process of working on contract renewals. And we are going to fund Children's Learning Institute in this next fiscal year to make those system improvements that were identified. Then on House Bill 1615 from last session, we did implement guidance needed for boards to add a representative or designate a representative on their board who does represent the childcare workforce. So those rules were enacted and guidance was issued by a workforce development letter. And then we also have been working on the implementation of House Bill 2729. So this was related to the pre-K partnership programs and stumbling here, the codifying of the program into state law. So this was the program that we stood up with using stimulus funds, but now it's a required program that TWC will run. So we will have for this ongoing program 12 dedicated local staff that will continue to support the expansion of partnerships. And also just wanted to share that to date, we have awarded $2.25 million to 90 new pre-K partnership classroom sites. So those are the startup awards that help those childcare providers to get their classrooms ready to meet the pre-K standards. We also have the implementation of the professional development scholarship. So previously we ran this program modeled after Teach, putting out a grant to run that. And there was a rider that required us to spend at least $750,000. That has now been increased. We just awarded that grant again to Texas Association for the Education of Young Children, and that grant amount is now at $3 million to cover scholarships for CDAs, associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, and apprenticeship. This time we've also included the ability for not only childcare workers to receive a scholarship, but for high school students that are in CTE programs working towards a CDA to get the scholarship for the exam for attaining the CDA. So that's exciting. Oh, I went too far. Okay, couple more legislative updates. These are focused really on Texas Rising Star. So as you know, we've been very busy since last session, and these two pieces of legislation that passed that really significantly affect the Texas Rising Star program. And that's 1792, the centralization of the Texas Rising Star assessors so that they're no longer employed by the local board or their contractor. They're now working for a statewide entity. And also 2607, implementing mandatory Texas Rising Star for all child care subsidy providers. So I wanted to note that when we entered into this contract for the centralized assessment entity a year ago, we had over 4,000 programs who were participating in childcare services, TWC's program, who met the entry-level designation criteria, who needed to be assessed this year. 4,000. So, and that large number is really due to the fact that at the same time we're centralizing assessors, we're also dramatically expanding the Texas Rising Star program by requiring more programs to participate. So it has been a challenging year. The contractor has made impressive progress considering the challenges. They've conducted significantly more assessments than the boards did the prior year. So that's good. That being said, we still have a long way to go, and we will, because of that, we will be looking into providing entry-level waivers to those providers that we just can't get to by the end of September. So they will be able to extend the amount of time that they are sitting at that entry level, because this is, you know, a circumstance outside of their control. We're also implementing a temporary provision that will allow us to go ahead and assess the 2-star level through a desk review. You can have, in order to achieve 2-star, you don't actually have to score any points on the points-based measures. If you meet all the required structural measures, you can earn a 2-star. So by allowing this desk review, we can significantly speed up getting programs at least to that level. We will go back and assess them later, so that they have the opportunity to, you know, prove that they may be operating at a higher level. But this lets us get them in the door more quickly. So we're working on rolling out that change here this fall. So, and just a reminder that, you know, when TWC proposed this legislation to centralize the assessors, that concept was conceived before House Bill 2607 was introduced. So it's been a little bit of a perfect storm, but it's an improvement. So we will get there. And then lastly, I wanted to make sure that you were aware of the Texas Rising Star 4-year review process having been completed. So our goal this time around was to focus on some pretty targeted areas for improvement and streamlining. I think there are some people on this call who participated on that work group, so thank you for your input and help with that. But with this particular review, we didn't want to do like a wholesale top to bottom revision, because obviously providers are dealing with a lot right now, just in becoming, so many of them, thousands, needing to become certified. So you can follow that link and find all the information about what we changed with that review. Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and share. I have a couple of things I'll point out that we did change. The look back period for the licensing review. So, you know, we periodically look at a provider's licensing history to see if they've accumulated a lot of deficiencies. And we changed that look back period to be, instead of 12 months, to now be only 6 months. And with that, we reduced the points threshold that we look at for the deficiencies. We weight those high and medium high deficiencies and add up points. We reduced the points for that from 75 to 40, along with the shorter look back. So that allows providers to be able to come back into compliance more quickly. And then we also made some changes to the screening process for probation B, so that rather than imposing probation for a program with 10 to 14, it used to be 10 to 14 high, medium, high deficiencies. Instead, we're changing that to also use this points-based model. So again, we add up point values for high and medium high deficiencies, and they can't exceed 25 points for that probation B. Okay, moving on. So we're in the process right now of working on rate setting. So wanted to make you aware of some updates on this. We continue to set our baseline rates for regular care. That's without any kind of enhancement for Texas Rising Star certification. We set those at the 75th percentile. I want to make sure everybody heard that right, because sometimes people don't hear it right. It's the 75th percentile, meaning of the market rates for a given workforce area, 75% of the providers that were sampled in their statistically valid sample, 75% of them charge less than that number, 25% of them charge more. So that's a percentile. Sometimes people confuse percent with percentile and think we're paying 75% of the rate, the market rate, and that's not the case. So continue to be at the 75th percentile. But then we also look at our cost of quality price modeling study. And if that study shows that the rate should be higher to provide care that meets a base level of health and safety, meaning providers that don't have a ton of licensing deficiencies, then we increase the rate accordingly. So that has led to a large number of rates having targeted increases because the cost of quality showed a higher rate. Most of those are in your infant and toddler rate categories. So last year we had a study, the cost of quality study done for licensed centers. This year we have one done for licensed and registered homes. So we will switch back every other year. We'll do centers one year and then homes the next. And we continue to use those as reference points to do those targeted increases. The other thing I want to mention is that if the prior year's rate was higher than the rate that we end up with through this process, we don't update it. We leave it at the higher rate that it was the year before. So nobody's rates go down that way. So in the current fiscal year that we are in, where we had the study available for centers, we did see that 22 infant rates were actually increased above the 75th percentile. That's the regular rate before the Texas Rising Star enhancement. 22 infant rates were increased anywhere from a little over 1% to up to 26% higher. So it varies a lot, but some of them saw a considerable bump. And of course, if you layer on that their quality rating, then it's even more. There were 17 toddler rates similarly that were increased over the 75th percentile, and those range from about 3% higher to 23% higher. And then it kind of tapers down. There were only 9 preschool rates that increased above the 75th percentile. And those were anywhere from 1 to 14%. So you can see where it really has a dramatic impact on those youngest, the rates for the youngest children. Okay, so we're currently analyzing data for fiscal year 25. The federal fiscal year starts October 1st. That's when rate changes go into effect. You can expect to see the commission taking action in probably a few weeks on what those rate changes are going to be by mid-September, I'd say. So keep an eye open for that. Okay, and this is my last slide. Okay, so wanted to share some updates on data and systems work that we're doing. So we continue to update Child Care by the Numbers. There's a link there if you haven't seen that site. We update it quarterly. Working with our data divisions, data sets and charts and everything to Tableau, which will provide interactive dashboards, which we think will be a lot more flexible in terms of how you can see and pull the data. So that is work in progress. On Texas Child Care Connection, TEX3C, that's our new child care case management system. So phase 1 was the introduction of the automated attendance system that uses tablets and smartphones. That was introduced over a year ago, back in May of 23. The full case management system, we're still working on. The latest launch date had been September 1st. However, I can tell you that we just made the call earlier this week. that we are going to push that out again. So I'll remind those of you who know and share for the first time, if you don't know, that we're moving to pay providers prospectively. So they will receive payment for childcare for a 2-week period in advance of that care being provided. So there are only like 3, maybe 4 states in the country that are doing this, and our vendor does not support any of them. So they had to build this for us custom. And as you can imagine, anytime you're doing anything that involves money, there has to be a really low tolerance for error and risk. So we want to make sure that it's working well, and that the workforce boards are ready to hit the ground running when we turn it on for them. So we have done a deployment and the system's out there, but we just haven't turned it on for the workforce boards to start using it yet. So I don't have a date to share, but hopefully we will have one here pretty soon. Again, that decision was just made 2 days ago. So also wanted to update you on some preschool development grant efforts that are in progress. We are just now getting started on the work for an eligibility screener that will live on earlychildhood.texas.gov. It will initially support eligibility screening for childcare services, public pre-K, and Head Start. So it will be a tool that lets parents put in their information, their personal information, and it will essentially generate a report back telling them programs that they may be eligible for and providing the information on how to apply for those programs. So this is something that we will have to procure. TWC is the lead on that project, and so we've just started on that procurement process. And then the other exciting systems development being funded with PDG is an ECIDS, Early Childhood Integrated Data System. So this is something that TEA is taking the lead on, and it will leverage work that the Early Learning Council did with the help of an ECIDS focused work group. And there's a link there to the roadmap that group developed and that the council approved. That will be kind of our blueprint for what that work looks like. TEA is in the process right now of hiring staff that will help to manage this project. And that is all of my update. So I will stop sharing my screen now and see who has questions.
Thank you, Allison. Always good information. So as always, yes, there are questions. Surprise. So the first one around the waivers, how and what do childcare providers need to know or do if they are in that catchment of potentially needing a waiver because their visit won't be done by the end of September?
So they will work with their workforce development board on that. The board will be the one to submit the waiver request to TWC. So they should expect to get more information from their board about what that process will look like. And I see he also said that, is it okay to still enroll subsidy children at this time? So if you have the waiver, you would be able to enroll subsidy children if the board is currently outreaching and enrolling children, that is. And I know that in most of the state right now, there are waiting lists and they may not have enrollment open. So just caveat it with that. Cost of quality service has risen with loss of enrollment due to ISD's expanding services to 3 and 4s and before and after school. How will you address this issue for private licensed centers? So the Child Care Services program is funded through a federal block grant. It's about $1.3 billion now. And with that funding, we are able to afford to serve currently, it's about 150,000 children on average per day. And that represents, it fluctuates, but it represents about 11 to 13% of the available licensed capacity in the state. So the program is a very small piece of the funding out there. So the program's not in a position to fix industry-wide problems, unfortunately. It just isn't. And it's kind of an algebra problem that you've got this much money and whatever it costs per child, and then the number of children you're serving. So if you increase how much you're paying, you're going to serve fewer children, or vice versa, right? But this is why we have, invested quality resources. We do have set aside for quality improvement activities, and that is one of the things we're doing, is to try to support providers in building those partnerships. And then I'm sure in the breakout session, there will be discussion on this topic among others. As you know, state agency program staff, I can really only speak to what we're funded to do and authorized to do under CCDF and what the legislature has charged us with. So
Great.
Probably,
That was a very good answer, Allison.
it's not the answer anybody wants, but
But it is the answer. There is only so much money that we currently have. So if we could all just write a check, we could solve all the world's problems. Allison, thank you so much for being here. We always appreciate your insight and your knowledge and all the work. We are keep sending you guys good juju for that Texas 3C platform, because I know that prospective payment will make a huge difference for childcare providers, and they're anxious to get that going, and anxious for us to be a leader in the country, to be one of the first adopters of that too. So thank you again for your continued work on all things that you do. So all right, with that, we've got about 15 minutes left to go into breakout rooms like we had promised. So Becky, I think you've got our breakout rooms ready. So you should be able to hit the breakout room on the bottom, and then pick which one you want to join. And then we'll have conversations, and we'll come back at the very end to just say goodbye and thank you. So so join which one do you want to join? I'm gonna go. Well, if your breakout room was like ours, it was too short.
No kidding.
All of our state leaders has had too much to share. Not a bad thing. So, all right. Well, let me share a screen. I've got just a couple. Hang on. Let me get to the right. There we go. Goodness gracious. Where'd you all go? There we go. Well, again, on behalf of all of us with the PN3 Collaborative, thank you for being here. These are some of our action alerts, and I think Becky or Lynn can drop in our, many of you have signed up for the Texas Prenatal 3 newsletter, so please sign up. We also will have action alerts as we start to enter legislative session. So stay tuned. We hope to do another one of these in the coming months. So we will dig more deep into policy and what we're thinking for session. So stay tuned for that. Have a great rest of your day. Stay cool. And we appreciate you all. Keep doing the good work out there and throughout Texas.
Thank you, Kim.
You're welcome.